I came to AA about 7 years ago. I'll be 7 next week, and I didn't want to be in AA. And I came to AA because I was in a psychiatric hospital where I'd had a breakdown. And I was diagnosed by this doctor that I found myself in his office in bits, and he said, "You're an alcoholic and you're probably a drug addict and you need to come in and sleep." I hadn't really slept for about, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and so I went into his hospital primarily for a week to sleep, and at that point I didn't know, I hadn't really taken on board. I think I knew that I was an alcoholic. I knew I was drinking alcoholically, but I didn't think that I was an alcoholic, if that makes any sense. And after about 6 or 7 weeks in the hospital, I got bored of all the other patients who were mostly people who had had breakdowns for other reasons, and so I went to AA. He said to me, "I want you to go to AA." So I went to AA, and it was everything I thought it wasn't going to be, and it was an amazing experience. And from that day on, for the next 3.5 years, I went every day to an AA meeting. It was bad enough for me, and I stopped comparing my bottom to other people's in terms of AA. I might compare it in terms of how big is my bum, but I do think that for me, I've been really lucky. I had a rock bottom. It was serious enough for me to take it really seriously, and I haven't relapsed, so I haven't had a drink since that day. And I do think that if you don't experience that kind of drastic situation or intervention, it can be quite difficult to do the steps necessary to stop drinking.
And rock bottom is a basic realization that I don't have to deny who I am. I am who I am, and it's beautiful the way I am. I also hit a realization that these games were counterproductive, and they are going to take me into a spiraling pit where I will self-destruct. That awareness that I can't live on the periphery anymore like this. I need to stop this.
And another thing that was characteristic of my using and drinking was I didn't ever really end the night with the same people that I started out with. It was somehow I wound up with a whole different crew, or with a different person than I began it with. So that all was going on this evening. But the thing that really stood out about this particular night, Lindsay, was that I couldn't explain to the person that I was with where I lived.
Because I was in a relationship with my mother, and you know, what can one do? One's a child, one can't get out of that relationship. So one learns to adapt to it. And the inability to tune out. And so no matter how much I got screamed at by either my mother or by my first long-term relationship, because there was a lot of screaming, I could pull into the shell of not hearing. And it would be like I'd be looking from within my body through eyes that were at the end of long binoculars. And they were an outer shell, and I was inside protected. And that's how I would feel when I was being screamed at by somebody for reasons that didn't seem justified to me.
Well, I had a really big, I overdosed in my apartment, and my mother had this really bad feeling, and she removed the hinges off the door of my apartment, and I was blue. She took me out. I was 26, and they took me to the hospital, and I was pronounced dead. And I had an adrenaline shot. I didn't even know what it was until I saw the movie Pulp Fiction. I came to a couple of days later. I had 2 huge black and blues on my chest. But I was drinking all the time. I was doing drugs. You know, at 385, 400 pounds, I always had black and blues. So I didn't really think anything of it. And they said I had an adrenaline shot. And then I realized an adrenaline shot in your chest, you know, was a long needle going into my heart. And I looked into a 12-step program, and I remember going to a meeting. I mean, I was 26 at the time. It was like, it seemed like a bunch of 40-year-old guys in trench coats. I said, what a group of losers these are. And, you know, I thought I could do it on my own. You know, that own self-reliance of I could do it on my own and I didn't need anybody else. I think that's a big part of most addicts want to do it on their own or just can't even ask for help. Then I think I was too uncomfortable to ask for help or not knowing what help was. And it kept me out for years on my own preconceived knowledge of what programs were, what 12-step programs were.
I can remember when I went to my first meeting to deal with the overeating. I went to that program, and on the way there, I started to talk to myself, and I said, why are you doing this? You don't really want to go into another 12-step program. You don't really want to do this. And I was just really trying to convince myself to turn around and go home. And then suddenly I realized how many hundreds of times I had tried to approach this problem through my own efforts. And I said, you know, Jack, you're not going to recover by yourself. You're not going to get better by yourself. You never have. Just keep going. So I went to my first meeting.
In 1984, I was doing a piece at what was then the Quaig Theater, with these 3 short plays by Yeats, and or 2, and I met another person who since has become a yoga teacher, and she noticed, you know, that I wouldn't just have a glass of wine after the rehearsal. You know, I had a 12-ounce glass that I grasped like a gun barrel, you know, and it was just. And she said, you know, so we became friends and friendly, and she says, you might want to take a look at this. And I says, what do you mean? Well, she said, you know, you come to rehearsal, you smell like you've been out all night, you know. You know those pheromones, you know, when somebody says, you know, was tanked up the night before, you know, this stuff just reeks out of you, and you don't smell it, but everybody else smells it. And I says, what do you mean? She says, well, I know exactly what you're going through, because you know, I'm in the program, and this is the way it is. And so she took me to my first meeting.